The BYU Cougars are the BYU Cougars, are 11-1 for the first time since 2001. They beat UCF and they set up a rematch with Texas Tech, but will it really matter unless they win in Arlington? We're talking about all that and a whole lot more on this postcast edition of Locked On Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is America's #1 sports podcast network. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer at the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider, your host here on the show, and as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, so BYU gets the job done. They beat the UCF Knights 41-21, and they're 11-1. First time in the regular season that BYU has won 11 in games since 2001. And it has been a minute since BYU has won this much, but they've never won this much at this level. And we'll get more into that momentarily. We'll also talk about rematch with Texas Tech, where the CFP standings are. And it's sad BYU's not getting much help in front of them, but that's beside the point. So we got a lot to talk about in this postcast, but let's get things started. If you have not done so already, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. If you're watching this live on YouTube, I can already see almost 100 of you already in the thing. Hit that thumbs up icon right down there in that lower right corner on YouTube. That thumbs up tells the algorithm, hey, you like this content, and helps other people find it. But as always, thank you for your support. So solid win for BYU against UCF, but slow start. 14-0 out the chute. First quarter was one that BYU would rather forget. I'm sure the coaches will be very quick to point to BYU's slow start. And in the post-game press conference, I asked Coach Sitake straight up, do you feel like there was some complacency that set in with this team, considering they knew they already clinched that Big 12 title game berth? And maybe for the first time ever, Kalani was pretty human about it and says, no, we're human. And I think he said that. I think there was a mixture of UCF and Scott Frost had some things scheme-wise that affected BYU, but he also said that we're human. We knew what we were up against. We knew that we'd already clinched our spot in Arlington, and that may have crept in a little bit. And I think that was the right answer for Kalani to admit to, because I do think that UCF came with a very good first couple of drives, had some plays drawn up that gave BYU fits. But once BYU caught up, and essentially once Evan Johnson intercepted that ill-fated double reverse pass, which that running back needs to understand, you don't throw that ball in that circumstance. It felt like it restored the order BYU needed on that. And then from that point on, BYU went on a 31 unanswered point run, ultimately outscored the Knights the rest of the way 41-7. UCF ended up with 296 yards. They had 146 by my count, if I recall correctly, after the first quarter. So you do the math there. They had 150 yards the rest of the game in the final three quarters after a pretty prolific first quarter. So you got to give BYU their flowers for handling their business, but you can't ignore the fact that they had a slow start. If you want to chalk it up, it is the fourth time now in Big 12 play, if I'm not mistaken, that BYU has come back from a double-digit deficit in Big 12 play this year. So this is not a team that is unfamiliar with having to come back this season. They've done it time and time again, and that's the fourth time they've done that. And that's a credit to BYU. I know the only time they didn't do it was that loss to Texas Tech, and that seems to have played a role in them being perceived as an outsider when it comes to the CFP. But we'll talk more about the CFP momentarily. I want to talk more about the game first off. I thought BYU's defense, they had a very slow start. I felt like particularly in this game. I thought if you wanted to point to a unit, in my opinion, that had the slowest start, it was BYU's defense. It felt like they, in some ways, were going through the motions early on in this game. But I think once they realized, hey, you know what? We still got to play ball here, because this was a UCF team that came in and was intent on getting to bowl eligibility. The crazy thing is BYU knows exactly where UCF was 2 years ago. Remember, this very weekend, 2 years ago, BYU played a double overtime game in Stillwater, Oklahoma against Oklahoma State and lost in agonizing fashion in double overtime to finish that season 5-7. They wanted nothing more than to scrounge away to get a win, to get to 6-6 that year and have bowl eligibility achieved. And they didn't accomplish that. the incredible part is, think about the two directions that Oklahoma State and BYU have gone since that game. BYU is now 22-3 since that time, and Oklahoma State, they've essentially, in many respects, hit rock bottom. Mike Gundy's out of a job. They've hired Eric Morris. So it's pretty incredible to watch the trajectory BYU's on. Let's not ignore the fact, everybody, that BYU is going to play for a Big 12 title in just their third season in the Big 12 conference. There's a certain program up the road that 3 seasons into their Big 12 tenure, or not their Big 12, their Pac-12 tenure was 5-7. That's the Utah Utes. So what BYU has accomplished in a relatively short amount of time is nothing short of remarkable. And I will give credit to UCF. And Big Floppy, you said this right here. UCF threw everything but the kitchen sink at BYU. And I think in some respects, Big Floppa, they even threw the kitchen sink at BYU. They were doing everything within their power to get out to a strong start. And they did exactly that. And BYU, it took them a minute to bounce back from that slow start. And that's both concerning and also admirable that BYU could find themselves in a 14-0 hole and seem to have everything spiraling out of control, and then essentially say, okay, enough's enough. We're regaining control of this game, and then essentially we're going to run away with it. So I do think that it's a credit to BYU for handling their business. Players that stood out to me, I'm still absolutely just floored by Bear Bachmeier. He goes 21 of 25. His career high in completion percentage is 84%, 289 yards, 1 touchdown. And then LJ Martin. What else can you say about this kid? He's going to be a first-team All-Big 12 honoree, or I will be floored if he's not. 22 carries, 95 yards, and had BYU left him in the game, he very easily would have gone over the 100-yard mark. Has a hat trick of touchdowns. He's got 11 touchdowns now on the season, and if that's the final regular season game at home that LJ Martin ever plays for the BYU Cougars, tip of the cap to that young man. He's had an incredible season, and he is playing at less than 100%. That shoulder, he is playing through it, and that was really impressive to see him what he did, and it was cool to see him get honored alongside the other seniors after, both before and after the game. And like I said, if that's the final time that we see LJ Martin at Lavelle Edwards Stadium, doesn't mean it isn't, because he did say after the game he'd love nothing more than to suit up once again in mid-December in a playoff game at LES, but that remains to be determined. But I do think that he has put on everything he could on tape for NFL scouts, and he said the feedback from the coaches before the game was to walk on senior day. He absolutely needed to go out there, and if he is going to move on to the pro level, hats off to him. It really was fun to see that. And yes, Guy, you said that I wish LJ would have gotten 5 more yards to get to 100. Yeah, I was tracking it, and I was hoping that final drive they would trot him out, see if they could get him 1 5-yard run and immediately yank him. But hey, at that point in the game, there's no reason to put him at risk, and obviously you're well in control of that game. Now, other guys who stood out, Parker Kingston, absolutely incredible. And Big Floppa, you said it right here. By the way, Parker said he fell on that possible TD run because he had some food poisoning the night before. Take that as you will. Seemed to me the turf monster got everybody today. The turf at LES, I was on it after the game. It is beat up. It has got divots. It's got holes. It's got bare patches. It needs a lot of work, speaking of the grass at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. But Big Floppa, I will just say this. It is true. Parker Kingston did have food poisoning, and okay, our Insiders Group members knew about this mid-game. I sent it out to our Insiders Group members, a plug for you guys to join if you have not joined the Insiders Group, because I got a tip that he was sick, and I sent it out mid-game and said, hey, just a heads up, Parker Kingston is ill, and the performance that Parker Kingston put on, that's MJ flu game type performance. He ends up leading BYU in receiving, 6 for 126, along of 46 on the season on 8 targets, had 68 yards after the catch. And oh, by the way, his 3rd career punt return touchdown, which ties him for 2nd all time behind some guy named Golden Richards. Yeah. Some of you who are old school BYU fans know who Golden Richards is. If you are a young BYU fan who doesn't know who Golden Richards is, go back and learn about Golden Richards. He is one of the all-timers. So it's cool to see Parker Kingston putting his name up there among some of the greats. So yeah, that was fun to see. I thought that JoJo Phillips had a pretty solid game in place of Chase Roberts, kind of taking over that lead receiver role. I know that Parker had the bigger stats, but Parker's more of that slot receiver. And then I got to flip over to the defense for guys that stood out to me as well. I just want to pull some, make sure I have the stats right here. Yeah, Jack Kelly, 6 total tackles, 2 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits, and oh, by the way, a forced fumble. Jack Kelly said that he wished he would have been a BYU Cougar his entire college career when we were talking to him post-game. And that's a perfect performance to go out on in many respects. Jack is an absolute beast out there. BYU is going to be sad to lose him, obviously, but he is going to be a really, really nice player at the next level. Jack is one of those all-timers I've always appreciated. Other guys who stood out, Evan Johnson, I thought had a very strong game, had the interception, obviously, to kind of stem the tide for BYU in this game. He ended up with 4 tackles. And then Tanner Wall, in his final game as a Cougar, Tanner Wall has 4 total tackles, 3 of them solo, and came oh so close. If you remember that fumble that Jack Kelly forced, Tanner tried to scoop and score, and the ball kind of took a funny hop. Ultimately, Raider Demooney fell on top of it to recover it, but you could tell Tanner was like, man, I missed out on that opportunity to maybe scoop and score in his final game as a Cougar. So really impressive stuff for BYU in that game, and a solid win. Honestly, you ran away from UCF. The College Football Playoff Committee can't be trusted, I think, to watch any game BYU plays, and they'll look at the box score and say, oh, that was a tidy 20-point win for BYU. Now, some people say, well, they fell behind 14-0. Sure, but that would require, like I said, the playoff committee to, actually watch this game. And with it being rivalry weekend, I think there were a few other games they may have had their eyes glued to, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, other things, real quick on the game. It felt like the offensive line, similar to the defense, had a really slow start, but they did pick it up as the game progressed. So I do like the fact that BYU did their thing, got the W, and now they're headed to Arlington, Texas, to AT&T Stadium to take on Texas Tech for all the marbles. Everything that BYU wants to accomplish this season, winning a Big 12 title. They made the Big 12 title game, so that's an accomplishment from a season ago they missed out on. But now a chance to win that title and also a chance to clinch your spot in the college football playoff. It's all right there for BYU, and we'll get into that as we continue on in this postcast edition of Locked On Cougars. Really going to be interesting to see how the playoff committee handles an 11-1 BYU and, the likes of Texas, who are 9-3 and saying that it would be a disservice for us not to. Sark, I love you. You're a BYU legend, but for you to say it'd be a disservice for your team to miss out on the playoff, man, that's talk about some homerific stuff from the SEC. But we'll talk more about that momentarily. I also want to talk about Texas Tech and what I want to see BYU do to make a different outcome, hopefully, than their first encounter. And we'll get to all that next, right here on this postcast edition of Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Woodward. Now, it's a local company here. We're just going to say it. The fun per foot ratio at Woodward Park City is second to none. Located just 20 minutes from the Salt Lake Valley, Woodward offers experiential learning in a radically fun and safe environment. And we're talking about winter sports. Any of you who know anything about Woodward know it is like one of the foremost in terms of having everything you need to do when it comes to action sports and winter sports. You can bounce from parks to pits, ramps to tramps, and back again. And right now, their Mountain Park season passes are on sale for just $499. And with facilities for all abilities, the door is always open to first-timers and regulars alike. The best part is you can maximize your mountain time this winter at one of the best terrain parks in Utah all season long. And if you're looking to go all in and do even more, their all-access memberships provide just that, from passes to perks, discounts, and a whole lot more. Just starting out, learn on the fly with Woodward's tribe in seasonal and multi-week programs that build your skills and confidence in a Stoke-inspiring environment. And just 20 minutes once again from Salt Lake, Woodward offers that experiential learning with facilities for all ages and all abilities along the way. You can learn more at woodwardparkcity.com. That's woodwardparkcity.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On America's #1 sports podcast network. Another plug for you guys. More than 200 in the waiting room. Looks like watching this. Hit that like button on YouTube if you're watching this live. If you're listening to it after the fact or watching it after the fact, do this exact same thing. Like, subscribe, rate, and review. It's the holiday season. Share with your family and friends that this is daily BYU content they won't find anywhere else. And like I said earlier, Parker Kingston, our insider group members, if you've not joined the insider group, they knew about it mid-game that Parker was ill, and it sounds like a lot of people didn't find that out until post-game. So just another plug for what we're doing here on Locked On Cougars. So BYU now heads to Arlington, Texas for a rematch against Texas Tech. This is going to be a difficult game. I'm not going to try and put lipstick on a pig. Texas Tech is one of, if not the best team BYU has faced in quite some time. They're ranked 5th in the country. I think that they should be higher than that, but I understand, the SEC and the Big Ten kind of control the narratives when it comes to this sport we all love in college football. So therefore, they're stuck at number 5 right now. But what I love about this opportunity for BYU is exactly what BYU wanted. They wanted another crack at these guys. And Chase Roberts, he came off as almost cocky in a way after that Texas Tech game, saying, hey, when we get another chance at them, essentially saying when, not if, when we get another chance at them, we're going to beat them. Now, he's got to back up that we're actually going to beat them because Chase did miss today's game with a hamstring injury. But from what I understand, the whole target was to miss this game on senior day, albeit he would have liked to have played on senior day. But he understood there's a bigger target in mind with that Big 12 title game. They want another crack at Texas Tech. They know they performed absolutely horribly, especially on offense and special teams down there in Lubbock, Texas. You can't ignore what BYU did in that game. You can't ignore how poorly they played. But now the opportunity is there for BYU to go out and show that they've learned from those mistakes. What I want to see from BYU in this game is, if you have not watched the Texas Tech-Arizona State game, the only loss that Texas Tech has taken this season, go back and watch it. And it's something that Hans Olsen, I was driving home getting ready for this postcast, and it's exactly, I'm going to pretty much parrot what Hans Olsen said, but I had the same thought because I've rewatched that Texas Tech-Arizona State game, and the way that Arizona State won that game was they essentially told Arizona State's offensive line, the running backs, and speaking of their quarterback at the time, Sam Leavitt, guys, we know they have elite pass rushers. We know they can bring the heat. Speaking of Texas Tech, Romello Height and David Bailey have 21 sacks combined between them as the edge rushers for Texas Tech. We are going to take an opportunity and we're going to put you guys on islands and say, you got to win more often than not. And we got to have Sam Leavitt get that ball out of his hands. That's the way that Arizona State won this game. Is they put 4 and 5 wide receivers out in the field and essentially told Sam, you essentially have 2.5 seconds to get the ball out of your hands, or else they're going to be on top of you. That's exactly what BYU needs to do in this game. They need to watch what Arizona State did, and enough with the max protect, enough with trying to put 8 guys on the line and jam it down Texas Tech's throat. There are moments in those games you need to do that, but BYU's game plan, it feels like, for Arizona, for this Texas Tech rematch, needs to essentially do what Arizona State did and say, Bear, you got 2.5 seconds, and we're going to run route trees that are going to allow you to decide on where to go with that ball, and that ball has got to be out of your hands. There is none of this scrambling around. There is none of this sitting back there and patting the ball. None of that. You have maybe 2.5 seconds to make a decision, throw that ball, and if nobody's open, get out of the pocket, throw it away. That is how BYU is going to win this game, is to have an offense that is going to take chances. Yeah, he's probably going to get sacked, and he's probably going to get sacked multiple times against Texas Tech. There's zero doubt about that. You can't ignore what Texas Tech and their defensive front is capable of. That front seven, it is about as good as there is in the entire country. But where Texas Tech is vulnerable is on the back end. That is why I believe BYU needs to throw out what they did against Texas Tech and say, guys, we're going 4, maybe 5 wide, and we're going to take our chances and see what we're capable of. Yes, they get in short yardage. Yeah, LJ Martin, bring him in. Bring in Carson Ryan and put him in line, and then run it down their throat if at all possible, because they had some moments early on against Texas Tech where they ran the ball well. But I'm telling you, the game plan's got to be pretty radically different from the first time they faced off against the Red Raiders. And I believe that BYU, I'm not saying anything I don't think the coaches are already thinking. There's a reason why I'm what I call a second guesser. I sit in a podcast studio and analyze what BYU's coaches and players do. But I'm telling you, there's only one time Texas Tech has lost, and the reason why Arizona State won that game is essentially they did everything that everybody else has been afraid to do, and that is throw it up and really attack that secondary of Texas Tech. So I do think it'll be interesting to see what happens with regards to how BYU attacks the Red Raiders, because they absolutely have to do it. I don't think the BYU defense needs to change a ton, honestly. Maybe they need to take a little more opportunity to come away with some interceptions. I know that Evan Johnson, I think it was Trey Alexander, had missed opportunities in that game. But think about it. At halftime down in Lubbock, despite how horrific that first half was for BYU offensively and on special teams, the Cougars are down just 13-0. BYU's defense more than held their own to keep BYU in that game against Texas Tech. And had the offense shown up a little bit more, it might have been a little different down there in Lubbock. And that's what I've got to expect from BYU going into this game in this rematch against Texas Tech, is they should have confidence. And if you didn't see it on the field today, I noticed it myself. There was a certain running back wearing the number 30 suited up for the first time, it felt like, in quite literally months. Sione Moa. That is a nice thing. If he is anywhere near being cleared to play, and I know that the target for him was to play at some point this season, maybe, just maybe, the Big 12 title game is Sione Moa's return to action for the first time since East Carolina, and when he had that leg injury that really precluded him from playing the final 9 games, essentially the 9 games of Big 12 play. To have a 1-2 tandem at running back of him and LJ Martin would do wonders for BYU. Other things that could reinforce BYU in that game include Justin Kirkland. Kirkland is we've heard from Jay Hill, and I already had mentioned it to our insiders group before he revealed it, is that they've been planning on redshirting him, playing the 4 games he's available to play, and he played those 4 games and essentially shut him down. Well, now that it's the postseason, the NCAA changed the rule 3, 4, or 5 years ago where postseason play does not count against eligibility and redshirt rules. So Justin Kirkland, one of BYU's big defensive tackles that could really help anchor against a pretty strong run game for Texas Tech, he should be available to play in this game if he's cleared by doctors. And I can tell you, he's been working out diligently kind of off to the side when we've been finishing up media availability. He's been doing a lot of work extra after practice. So I do think it would be nice to have guys like Sione Moa available. Obviously, Chase Roberts, you need to have him back if at all possible for this game. But defensively, to add a reinforcement like Justin Kirkland to go alongside John Tamoe-Peau and Keanu Tanavasa on the interior of BYU's defensive line, there are some reinforcements that could be on the way for BYU and be very welcome to have them in this matchup. But if you, like I said, if you have not watched Texas Tech and Arizona State, go back and rewatch that game and watch how ASU essentially threw caution to the wind and said, yeah, we know that they have pass rushers. We know that they can bring the heat, but we have a quarterback and we have wide receivers that we trust to get open and complete passes. That's essentially how they came away with that victory, 26-22. That's the only loss that Texas Tech has absorbed, and it really feels like that game plan from ASU was the one that kind of stands in stark contrast from everything else, and even BYU. I understand why BYU went max protect against Texas Tech. They were trying to make sure that Bear Bachmeier had as much time to make decisions, but at this point, now you're 13 games, that'll be the 13th game deep on this season. You got to tell Bear, okay, we trust you. Go out there and make some plays. That's what you have to do to win this football game, is in some ways throw caution to the wind. I really do think that that's how you're going to win this football game, is to put 4 and 5 wide receivers out there. Obviously, Carson Ryan as a tight end is a really nice safety valve to have as well, and put him in routes. Carson Ryan can't be another offensive tackle in this game. He really cannot be, because if you try and do that, I feel like the same outcome is inevitable, and that's speaking of a loss to Texas Tech. And at 11-2, the tough part will be to consider BYU being left on the outside. But if you want to seize your opportunity to go to the playoff, you got to beat Texas Tech, and they're the opponent that's standing there, kind of the big bad bully that you're going to have to overcome if you want to live your dreams. And I'm looking forward to it. A couple of you, I think I got text during the game about this. Are you going to Dallas? I am. I will be going to Arlington, Texas. I will be there. I'm very much looking forward to it. And I'll reveal this. I said it earlier this week as well. Kind of bought those tickets 4 weeks ago. I had a feeling BYU would get the job done. I bought everything refundable. I did. I admit I was all refundable. If they didn't make it for whatever reason, I could just cash it all away. But I did buy those tickets weeks and weeks ago, and I am looking forward to going to Arlington. It's my second road trip of the year. It's my first official one in a working capacity, so I'm looking forward to being at AT&T Stadium. Last time I was there was actually Big 12 Media Days in 2023, so looking forward to being down there in Arlington, Texas. And any of you who are down there, if you want to hit me up, let's see if we can get something together. I'll be down there Friday, and also I won't be leaving until Sunday. So Friday, Saturday night, maybe able to do something where we can meet up, eat some food, and catch up. So looking forward to it. It should be a huge opportunity. I'm expecting a huge BYU contingent. I have seen the prices for flights surge, and I'll just put it this way. I'm very happy I bought one I did. So I would love to see many of you out there if at all possible. And I'll just also say this. I'm doing it on my own dime. I'm not traveling with KSL. I'm doing it on Locked On's dime. So to you guys out there watching this is how I pay for it. You guys subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing with your family and friends. And even if I don't get a credential, because I'll be going through Locked On for it, I'm going to be there. I might buy a ticket. I might be sitting in the stand. So I'm going to be there. I'm looking forward to it. And it's a huge opportunity for BYU. All right. So all that being said, Huge opportunity on deck for BYU, but there's kind of the big elephant in the room. What are the chances the playoff committee is actually going to, give BYU a bit of a break? Well, I don't expect it, but we'll talk more about where things stand with the college football playoff and where I think things stand for BYU. And we'll get into that next as we roll on right here on a postcast edition of Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little bit easier when you already know the perfect gift, and that's where Omaha Steaks comes in because they make it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or you're sending someone something memorable to your family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. I can speak to this personally because my mother-in-law has done this multiple times for me. The best part is this is the best week to jump in on it because their cyber sale is here and the deals are absolutely massive. The best part is Omaha Steaks have everything that what you want. The quality of incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking even easier than they could be already. The variety is underrated: steaks, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. It's one of those gifts that truly fits anybody, no matter what their palate might be. And it's honestly the best kind of gift that brings people together, and you don't need to guess anybody's size along the way. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks right now. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. Think about that. 70% off some of these items. Think about that. And an incredible $35 off. Additionally, you can use the promo code college at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code college for an additional $35 off your order right now. Terms apply, and you can go to their website to see for more details. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. Always appreciate you guys being here on the show. And here's the thing about looking at the college football playoff committee at this point is that we already, I think, very clearly understand that the playoff committee wants nothing to do with the Big 12. We have, like I said, Steve Sarkisian last night after the Texas Longhorns upset Texas A&M, saying it would be a disservice if we are not in the playoff. No offense, Texas, you're 9-3. 3 lost teams should not be playing for a national title, at least in this iteration of college football. Now, how that relates to BYU here is if BYU misses out on their opportunity to play for a national title, that means not getting into the playoff field. Whether, like I said, if they lose to Texas Tech, it sure looks like BYU will be on the outside looking in. If that is the case, I think you're very quickly going to see the conversation turn to 16, maybe 24-team playoff. I'm just saying it how I think it's going to go right now. It would be majorly disappointing if BYU, let's say they lose to Texas Tech, a team that in the last 2 seasons has got 22-4. If they miss out on the postseason for the second straight year, man, that's going to be a gut punch. But the nice part is BYU has every opportunity to go out there and win this football game and punch their way in to the playoff field. That is the way that you have to approach this if you're a BYU fan at this point, is understand that the playoff committee, it sure looks like they are planning on doing BYU and the Big 12 absolutely no favors. And I was appreciative that Brett Yormark came out last night ahead of the Territorial Cup game and said that I'm sure that the playoff committee will get this right come decision day. Where has Brett been for the previous 3 weeks when all of this conversation has really kind of taken hold about pumping up the SEC and pumping up the Big 10? I respect that the Big 12 wants to, as Brett says, earn it on the field, but man, you've got to speak out more vociferously in favor of your league. You've got to stump for them. And I can appreciate that Brett did it last night. And I know that Kalani Sitake says, he said after the game, and he said the question, I like our resume right now. That's great and all, but you've got to be more outspoken in defending your turf and telling people, no, the Big 12, we play good football here, and we deserve a chance to prove it. So the nice part is, Big Floppa says, the nice thing is BYU controls their own destiny, more, I'd say fate, because destiny is separate from fate. It's fate in this circumstance. They control their fate to an extent. Yeah. You win the game against Texas Tech, and then the playoff committee's got a major pickle on their hands. Are they going to boot Texas Tech? Man, you want to talk about somebody who's going to be on the warpath, is have Cody Campbell and the Texas Tech Red Raiders be left out after a championship game loss to BYU when they're ranked 5th in the polls. That's what could happen here. Let's say BYU does do the unthinkable and wins that game. That is all there for BYU to win this football game and essentially knock down the door. And that's the thing about this is BYU has control of throwing the entire playoff into upheaval. There are a lot of people out there, and you probably have seen it already, that they're talking about 6 SEC teams deserve to be in this playoff field. If we're going to put 6 SEC teams, 3 Big Ten teams, and then you get one each, essentially, no, 2 Big Ten teams, excuse me, and then one each from Notre Dame, the G6 representative, ACC, and Big 12, tell me that that's a fair field to have and a fair fight. It's not. It's absolutely not, and it's never going to be that. Now, also good point by Caden Prowse here. I don't think BYU is jumping into the top 10 even if Alabama wins. They'll put Miami and Vandy in over BYU. Just wait. Now, we have to see if Auburn wins tonight. That game should be kicking off, I think, right now. So that's one to watch because that's really the only game that can cause the chaos, as it were, ahead of BYU in this circumstance. I'm not holding my breath that BYU is going to get a break from the playoff committee. And even with Brett Yormark saying, I trust the committee will get it right, essentially shooting a shot across the bow of the playoff committee saying, you guys know what's right here. Don't leave us out. But let's also look at the circumstance of understanding that BYU, they control essentially the chaos factor when it comes to the playoff. Imagine the outcry from the SEC if BYU does beat Texas Tech and suddenly they're forced to put 2 Big 12 teams into the field because there's not a chance, and you know what, they're leaving Texas Tech out because Cody Campbell might burn the entire sport down if that happens. And he's the mega booster, the chairman of the board of trustees down there at Texas Tech University. If they only have 1 Big 12 team in, it's because Texas Tech beat BYU in that Big 12 title game rematch, and BYU gets spurned by the playoff committee. And in some ways, it'd be kind of the same as it ever was for BYU. And that's the interesting part about this. Now, this is another interesting chaos factor here. Stanford could be sneaky for Notre Dame. Would love that so much. Now, if Stanford wants to do BYU a favor and knock the Notre Dame Irish down a peg, I'm all for it. But I also don't think that Stanford is capable of hanging with Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is really, really good. I've got no problem saying that. And as Big Floppa says, I agree with this wholeheartedly. College football is first and foremost a business. It is absolutely business. And that's the unfortunate part about this is that it is about dollars and cents. It's about eyeballs, and it's about the powers that be that control this sport. We have one team. Speaking of Notre Dame, there are 11 representatives that make up the playoff, not advisory committee, what do they call them? Essentially the committee that runs the college football playoff. There are 11 people on that board. There are 10 commissioners of the 10 FBS conferences, so the Power 4 and the G6. And then, oh, by the way, the Notre Dame AD sits on that board. Notre Dame has an outsized influence on the playoff, and it is what it is. So you have to have BYU. In this case, it feels like they're going to have to knock down the door, and that's going to require a win over Texas Tech. That is really the only way it feels like BYU's getting into this playoff field. But like I said, the chaos factor that BYU could rain down on this college football playoff on Selection Sunday could be absolutely epic if they pull it off. So that's what we got to root for here for BYU is go beat Texas Tech and win that game. And if it doesn't work out, Big Floppy asked about this. Alamo Pop-Tarts Bowl. I'd be hard pressed to think Alamo Bowl wants BYU back for a second year. That's what my perception is. The Pop-Tarts Bowl in Orlando, I'd be all for that. And by the way, you could play Miami down there in Orlando. Let's say Miami doesn't get in because a lot of people stumping for Miami and make it out of the ACC because they have the win over Notre Dame. But there is a chance, Big Floppy, you say the Alamo Bowl has the tie with the Pac-12. It could be ASU BYU, similar to the Colorado deal last year where the old Pac-12 teams who are still contractually tied to games like the Alamo Bowl could set up a tasty game between ASU and BYU, but we'll see what happens. So, interesting question here from Alan. Is there an additional Big 12 payout for making it to the title game? I don't know that. That's a very good question. I would assume that there's some kind of incentive from some way about that. But it'd be interesting to see about that. Asking this, Julian asking this, what about BYU versus Utah in a bowl game? Bowl games are very, very reticent to put rematches of the regular season in bowl season. Now, would it be fun to have BYU and Utah play again? Absolutely, it'd be fun. But I just do not see that happening with BYU and Utah rematching in the postseason. It's not a thing that bowl games are very keen on doing. So, yeah. The long and short of it is, don't trust the playoff committee to do the right thing. I think it's been very, very clear for weeks now that BYU, they're going to have to earn it on the field, and that means beating Texas Tech in Arlington, Texas. Is it tough to consider the way that they do that? Yes, because you look at it based on the first outcome, it seems like it's a really, really kind of steep hill to climb for BYU, but that's why they're going for it here, and we'll see what happens in that game. And if it doesn't work out, like I said, I'll be out there crowing about moving to 16 teams at minimum. And heck, if you're going to move to 16 teams, let's go to 24. Honestly, let's do what the FCS does and go to 24 teams. Have representatives from all the conferences. You have 10 automatic berths for all 10 FBS conferences, because that's, I think, the only way you get the G6 on board with the 2014 playoff is to essentially open it up to all, and then you have 14 at-larges, or maybe guarantee a few extras to the P4s, because it feels like this is the season with all these teams kind of bunched up. You're going to have the Vanderbilts of the world arguing. Texas is arguing. Miami wants to get in. You're going to have a bunch of teams saying, hey, we should be in that playoff field. And it's going to force a change, because if you didn't see it, they were supposed to announce by December 1st that they were expanding the field. Well, the playoff committee and the conferences have agreed to move that back with ESPN to January 23rd, which ironically enough is the day after the national championship game. So they're essentially going to see how this playoff goes, see how the postseason goes, and then make a declaration on what the future of the playoff looks like. So that's essentially the outlook for how it goes, it feels like, for BYU. But once again, the nice part is, as I've been saying for quite a while now, a number of you have been saying it as well, BYU has everything within their control, and that means win the game against Texas Tech, and they can't do anything about it. They are forced contractually to put you in that playoff field, and that, for everything that BYU's been through this season, as unfair as it may appear with the playoff committee, you have the power to make it happen, and all it takes is winning one more football game in Arlington, Texas. So chaos factor, very real, and BYU essentially holds the cards in that circumstance. So that's going to do it for me. I'm going to sign off now. I really do appreciate all of your guys' support. I think we saw up to over 300 of you tuning into the live stream. Just another reminder for you guys, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching it after the fact, subscribe, rate, and review, share it with your family and friends, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, get the inside scoop on things like Parker Kingston's illness. Like I said, I sent it out mid-game. Those are the inside tidbits you get in the Insiders Group that you won't find out till later, but you'll get them earlier, it feels like, in some circumstances, and I always appreciate all y'all support. So I understand SWB. I'm very pissed off, Jake. I don't blame you. I think a lot of people are upset about what's going on with BYU. But once again, let me reiterate the fact before I go here. Everything that BYU wants to do, that means winning a Big 12 title, playing in the playoff, playing for a national title, it is all within their control. All they got to do is beat the Texas Tech Red Raiders. So we'll see what happens. We'll have plenty of coverage in the week to come. I'll have a film review Monday. I'm going to rewatch this game. Probably actually get that done tonight. We'll have that for you guys on Monday. But enjoy your Sunday, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. It's fun to have a day game and, have some time to spend with your family and friends. And we will catch you guys again on our Monday edition, another full edition of the podcast coming up. And we'll also talk more about BYU basketball and their MTE win. They have a title, the ESPN Events Invitational title. We'll talk about that on a film review Monday as well. So as always, thank you truthfully for all of your guys' support. You guys mean the world to me and what I do with this podcast. And until next time, everybody, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. And we'll catch you guys again as an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.